According to a new memo from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, his plans for the Defense Department aim to reduce projected U.S. military spending by 8% over the next 5 years, sparing certain areas within the defense space, though, including border control. Joining us now for more, we've got Henrietta Treyz, a managing partner and the director of economic policy at Veda Partners. Henrietta, great to have you back with us. How realistic is Hegseth's goal here to cut defense spending, and what do you think that could potentially look like?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think it's completely disingenuous, frankly. To say that you're going to cut 8% is one thing, but be aware that in the Senate, we have a bill that is going to be voted on later on today, authorizing what will ultimately be $350 billion in additional defense spending spread across immigration and military spend. So they could maybe cut around the edges and identify some areas to trim back. But on the other hand, and simultaneously, the U.S. Senate is moving forward with a bill that would exponentially increase defense spending. In addition, there's another CR, a government funding bill, that needs to pass by March 14th, which also includes a 2.7% uptick in military spending versus 2025. So I think if you're going to base this on what's going on in D.C., you need to look at Congress more than the White House.
So how do you see this netting out then?
I expect federal spending to rise throughout 2025 on almost every sector, defense and non-defense discretionary.
Can we talk about that in the context, too, of this idea from Musk? He teased out this idea of sending $5,000 checks to citizens following these cost-cutting measures, sort of like a dividend payment to the American public. How does that help DOGE with their goal to cut $1 to $2 trillion from the deficit?
It obviously doesn't. If you have $55 billion in savings, which is an inflated figure that their receipts do not prove, but let's just say it's accurate, providing stimulus checks to American voters is $1 trillion plus proposition. So the math does not add up. We do know that the president is very supportive of those individual stimulus checks because we saw them in his first term, and he very much liked signing those. And it was a huge part of the reason he was so popular during that time. So would definitely expect this to be something that they talk about, but obviously it would blow a hole in the deficit.
Yeah, Henrietta, how would this plan even work in practice? Could it?
It wouldn't. I mean, they have to get something through Congress. And right now, as we can see through the warring internal debate between the House and the Senate Republican conferences, they have not yet identified a path forward just to keep taxes flat, let alone provide stimulus checks of, I think you said $5,000 per person. It's entirely unrealistic. The math there is honestly really hard to wrap your mind around. You're talking trillions of dollars. So they don't have that in their current plan. And to enact tax policy, you need to have Congress. Legislation has to originate in the Ways and Means Committee. You have to go through Congress for something like this.
Do you anticipate Senate Republicans fracturing even further from the president ahead of what the president called yesterday that one big, beautiful bill that he is hoping for that includes those $4.5 trillion tax cuts?
Yes, the Senate is prepared to move forward with something called Vote-A-Rama beginning tonight. It will last 50 hours, and it is a direct defiance of the president's stated preference for one big bill. This is a $342 billion measure that, again, spends hundreds of billions on military and immigration and opening up energy permitting. It does not need to be offset in the reconciliation instructions, and they are moving forward with those votes today in direct opposition to what President Trump tweeted about yesterday.
Henrietta, I'm curious, just given the uncertainty coming out of Washington and given the research that you've done, in terms of what this means for the business community, what have you seen as the impact there?
There's a lot of concern around the tariffs. I would say a tremendous amount of focus on whether the Canada-Mexico tariffs really go into effect on pharmaceuticals, on energy and automobiles. I'm expecting that those get excluded from any tariffs that go into effect on our USMCA allies. But tariffs on China, I think, are taken very seriously. And then the EU auto tariffs also need to be taken very seriously as well. And I think the street's getting to that view now.
Henry, do you think, I would actually ask if the market's still discounting that, though, just the real risk of it, given the fact that it has been able or has shrugged off some of those most recent developments?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that the president does such a good job messaging around tariffs. You float the idea in the Oval Office on January 20th, Inauguration Day, say that there's an effective date by front-running your staff that's not even confirmed yet and say they're coming February 1st. And then now we slow walk that all the way through February into March 14th, into March 31st, then all of a sudden it's April. So investors are predictably and sort of justifiably not taking the president seriously. But a close, analyst, someone who follows former USTR Lighthizer, former USTR Catherine Tai, and incoming USTR Jamison Greer and Howard Lutnick should take these tariffs incredibly seriously. Not only do they absolutely have to have the revenue to offset the cost of this tax bill, but the president genuinely believes in the value of tariffs. And I think that there will be substantial tariffs imposed on or around April 1st, potentially with slow upticks, 5% to 10% to 15, et cetera. But the tariffs are coming.
What do you tell clients about how that interplays with capital markets then? Because in the lead up to the election and a lot of our coverage, we were urging people to remember, and investors said on our shows, that you don't want to trade on policy, on a potential election outcome. Is it different with tariffs?
Yeah, I think it is. And I would discourage folks from looking at the idea of universal tariffs and taking the president literally on that one. I'm not a big fan of that opinion, just because there are going to be exclusions. So I think the more nuanced investor would look at the tariffs and start to pinpoint individual sectors and start to say, okay, this specific company is going to be hit because we're going after X, Y, and Z. And that's going to be country and product specific. So for example, a Section 301 investigation into India that imposes tariffs as a result of, chemicals and pharmaceuticals, medical devices, that's entirely on the table. Are we going to see tariffs on Mexican automobiles? I don't think so. So you've really got to be very particular about how you play a tariff war.
All right, Henrietta, always great to talk to you. Thanks so much for making the time.